Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. We will be starting today's agenda as normal with the news. Then we'll be discussing passwordless and phishing-resistant authentication. And finally, we will be covering off any questions and answers that we have. Although it's just been Easter and everybody's been on a break and hopefully feel relaxed and fully recovered, Microsoft hasn't slowed down with any of their new updates and new news as always. So some of the latest news that we've heard is that security compute units for the people who are using Copilot Security now has new purchasing options. You can actually just purchase one security unit and then have it burst when you need it on a pay-as-you-go model. This is fantastic for organizations who does not necessarily want to commit to 3 security compute units at about £90,000 a year. Instead can commit to £30,000 for one compute unit and burst and use it as they need it for when there's a serious incident or a vast number of issues that they need to address. Also a reminder for people who's on the pay monthly annual commit, the 5% price increase has now take effect on the 1st of April 2025. Currently, there is no price increase on annual commit pay annually. So if you are coming up for a renewal and want to try and avoid the price increase, think about paying for the year in advance. It's not everywhere you get a 5% discount, as they say. Microsoft has also announced that data security investigation will be going live at the end of this month in preview. Look forward to that. That will help us identify security breaches or what type of data has been exposed leveraging the security copilot or AI systems. But that will mean that we'll be able to process a vast amount of data, get it analyzed quickly and tell us what potential passwords, for example, has been exposed, which accounts potentially have private detail, or what type of data has been exposed, to help us understand in more depth what type of breach it was, what the potential impact was. It could be maybe for a senior exec. However, if they don't have any real critical data in that area, we can understand what potential impact we have regarding IP, etc. And then finally, Defender for Cloud, AI enhancements. This is continuing moving at pace. So we are seeing more and more companies running their own AI models, presenting these models up to in Azure. And with Defender for Cloud, with the AI enhancements, we can now monitor for things like wallet compromises, potential links malicious links that's been inserted, trying to overwhelm the system. But it gives us a significant number of alerts and actions that can be taken. Very exciting news for everybody who's using it. So if you haven't looked at it, go and look at it. If you are leveraging AI at all inside Azure or Azure Foundry, but please keep an eye on that, as we're seeing significant enhancements. There's also new features in Copilot Security, but again, we'll talk about those probably in more depth over the coming weeks and months. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce Andrew Dancy, one of our solutions architects, who will be dealing with and talking us through passwordless authentication or phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication. Andrew, thank you very much and look forward to this session.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you everyone for attending. So I'd like to start by talking about where we are today, what we've got in place and why it's why passwordless is the way forward. So we all know that passwords can be very bad. We put things in place like complexity. That leads to people putting sticky notes everywhere or writing them down. I do some CSAT assessments, and I can guarantee you that I'll find an Excel spreadsheet on a desktop called passwords. The regular changes that we enforce causes more calls to help desks, and it is, of course, a primary attack vector for malicious attacks. All of this leads to bad user experience and a bad security experience. To address this, we started looking at putting in a second factor. for example, SMS and voice. That worked for a while, but it's been found to be insufficient, and there are attacks against both SMS and voice. By its nature, the technology that we use was based on PSTN network. It's unencrypted, can be intercepted. There are attacks such as software-defined radio, for example, that can and other techniques that can intercept SMS and voice. It's easy to socially engineer. It leads to message intercept, call forwarding attacks, SIM jacking, as a few examples. And of course, you rely on mobile operator performance. So if you don't have a signal, you don't get that SMS. There's also other factors like changes to regulation, which we're not in control of. A better solution came along with Authenticator, one-time password software tokens, like the old RSA tokens, hardware tokens. But all of these first three techniques, all of them involved using a password as well. What we've moved to recently is a passwordless solution. With Windows Hello, Authenticator phone sign-in, and FIDO security keys, as well as certificates. So the first three all involve a password. Why are passwords such an issue? Well, this next slide hopefully displays some of the issues behind it. And there is one key issue here. So if I just take the high frequency attacks that we in Softworks see on a day-to-day basis, credential stuffing, phishing, and password spray. All of these attacks have a common factor where your password really doesn't matter. With credential stuffing, passwords are reused. So credential stuffing is where an attacker has purchased those credentials from breach sites and is reusing them. Well, 62% of users admit to reusing the password. So you can't guarantee that within your organization, your user hasn't reused that password in his own personal capacity on a breach site. Password spray. This is where we're guessing based on dictionary attacks. It's easy to get a list of users, and the password, again, doesn't matter. It's out there. It's a commonly used password. So the common factor here is being human. What Passwordless is trying to do is to remove that human aspect from the logon credentials. So with in this graphic, we are having a look at the difference between security and convenience. With password and the standard two-factor authentication that we looked at earlier, it's high security, but it is inconvenient. You have to put in your username, your password, you then have to wait for an SMS, put in a code. It all leads to a bad user experience. Passwords, well, they may be more convenient, but as we've seen, they're low security. So the top quadrant here is the passwordless authentication, where we can very quickly get a convenient and high security login credential. So the two passwordless options we want to talk about are passwordless MFA and phishing-resistant passwordless MFA. And in particular, we're talking about Entra ID here. These are built-in policies that Microsoft supply you. So the passwordless MFA is concerned with Windows Hello for Business, platform credential if you're on Mac OS, pass keys, which Microsoft have moved away from calling them FIDO2, and you'll see more that they're called passkeys now. Passkeys cannot either be on a portable storage like a YubiKey, or they can be on Authenticator on Android and iOS as well, for instance. Certificate-based authentication, so we're talking about smart cards there and other cryptographic methods, and Microsoft Authenticator. We have a look at phishing-resistant MFA, we can see that one of those disappears, and that is the Microsoft Authenticator. So we have seen attacks with Microsoft Authenticator where there just becomes a fatigue of so many push requests to log on that users just give up and think it's themselves that are logging, that need to log on and authenticate, and they'll click OK. Of course, it's a bad actor that's involved in that request, and the breach is performed. So, for phishing resistant, we are specifically with Microsoft looking at Windows Hello for Business, Platform Credential, Passkeys FIDO2, and certificate-based authentication. Certificate-based is a little bit more complex because you've got to work with PKI, and of course you've got to secure that PKI. I've seen in the past sort of very bad deployments of PKI. If we're talking about Microsoft certificate authority, what tends to happen is someone will just put the service on, typically a domain controller, and set it up and walk away. That's the job done. That is not a secure deployment of a certificate authority. It is to do it securely is a lot more complex than that. So how much is all this going to cost? Well, the good news is there isn't any additional licensing required. So out of the box, you get the passwordless ability within Entra. However, to take real advantage of controlling the credential access, then P1 is advisable so that you control it with conditional access, and you can put some rules around how you can get into specific applications. Entra P2 will give you an extra layer with risky user policies, and not specifically to do with passwordless ID, but verifiable ID is something that Microsoft are pushing, and it is useful with the onboarding, as we'll see later. And the Entra suite provides 8 face checks per month. If you don't want to use Entra, but do want to use the Entra suite, but do want to use verifiable ID and face checks, then I believe it's about 25 cents per face check. So we'll talk in the next section a little bit about planning your deployment. These 6 steps that you can see here are Microsoft's recommended path to successful passwordless deployment. The first path in that is personas. And Microsoft again have given us an example of what they think are the correct personas. This may well be different for you, but it's quite a good first step to get that persona framework. Using personas can help us to focus on different challenges and considerations. So if we take, for instance, the information worker, and I've seen this myself, information workers may have a resistance to using their own personal devices for authentication purposes. I think it's maybe a valid complaint. People invest a lot of money on personal devices. They get very protective of them, and they don't want to feel that the company has any control over them or has a right to insist on any application being installed on them. If that's the case, then that's fine. We can use, for instance, security keys for select users. Maybe not all of those information workers, but some of them. Maybe you want to decide that you'll issue UV keys, for instance. Users have potentially a concern about biometric authentication as well. If they really don't want to use biometric authentication, we've got PIN authentication instead in Windows Hello, for instance. It's also worth looking at the mechanics of Hello for Business and how those biometrics are used and stored. Microsoft doesn't use them for any other purpose. They're stored locally. So the concerns can maybe be resolved with some communication and training. We also see re-registration problems when upgrading phones. So someone upgrades their own phone, we're not in control of that. And then all of a sudden they can't authenticate again. To alleviate that, we can address that maybe through using phishing-resistant credentials on work computers, or just provide more training and instructions on how to create passkeys, for instance. The next step that we need to ensure is in place is device readiness. Now this slide is showing Microsoft's minimum recommended OS versions. Softworks ourselves would recommend that you don't use Windows 10 22H2, but move as soon as you can to Windows 11 anyway. Similarly for all of the other devices, particularly if you're adhering to a framework such as Cyber Essentials and you want to be on the latest release anyway. But you can get away with these minimum OS versions. It's worth noting, however, that you'll get a better experience, for instance, with Windows 11, as we see there with passkeys, and also iOS 18 has a better experience as well, I believe. So our journey in a phishing-resistant deployment, we of course start with strong onboarding and recovery methods. I know in the past onboarding has been a real issue. Back in the day when we all were in the office, you'd perhaps go along to the IT department, or the IT guy comes sit beside you and you type in a new password yourself. But with remote working, that's become more difficult. Verified ID is a product that Microsoft are pushing. It's not really within the remit of this discussion today, but I think it'd be a good idea to go away and have a look at verified ID. It's not just for onboarding, there are many other reasons for verified ID to be of interest. So it's worth investigating further. What this slide doesn't mention is TAP, which is a temporary access pass, which we'll have a look at later as well, which is integral to that onboarding journey. We'll then have a look at portable credentials, local credentials, and the enforcement. So portable credentials and local credentials. Portable credentials are those credentials that can be used across devices. So they can be used to sign in to another device or to register credentials on another device. So typically what we're talking about there is authenticator on a phone. So if you have the passkey on your phone and you have cross-device authentication flow, then you can use a device to register your Hello for Business credentials on any of your local devices. Local credentials, these are credentials such as Windows Hello specific to your device. They don't move across devices, or similar to a PIN on your iPhone, for instance. So for existing MFA registered users, you can target the phishing-resistant registration straight away. They can use those traditional MFA methods for their first portable phishing-resistant credential, and they can use that to then move on to register on their local devices. New users or users without MFA are a little bit more difficult. For those, we need to issue a temporary access pass. For those of you that don't know or haven't seen a temporary access pass, we can perhaps pull that up if I just have a look in Entra, pick a user. So if you go to a user and you go to the authentication methods and add an authentication method, you can see here I can create a temporary access pass. We can delay the start time. So if you know that you're onboarding a user in the future, you can do this in advance should you want. You can use a one-time use or multi-use for the duration of the pass. However, in testing, I would say that one-time use does fail sometimes when you're registering those passwordless authentication. So perhaps test in your own environment. So if I add that, you see you're provided with a pass and with a link to my security for the user to go to. So this is where Microsoft think that the verified ID becomes useful. By using verified ID, you can provision a portal where they can go and get this pass potentially, and from there they can use that to start the onboarding process with their passwordless credentials. That's just one, for instance. Microsoft have got a few examples on GitHub and in their technical documentation. So if you're interested in that, it's worth having a look at. While we're talking about temporary access pass, you do need to enable it. It's probably not enabled by default, and we do that in the policies in Entra under protection. You can see there's temporary access pass here, and you'll just need to go in and enable it or check that it is enabled. You can configure groups in here, so you may want to further secure that temporary access pass ability by restricting it to maybe new users, maybe a dynamic group that changes once people have authenticated, something like that. And you can configure it for how long it's available for, whether you can require one-time pass use or not. If you do select require one-time use, then you can't change it on the user settings. So do test that first in your environment. Just to summarize there, it's important that first passwordless credential is a portable credential. So that allows them to move on to other computing devices and register those other computing devices. Otherwise, you're going to find you're going to have to keep resetting a temporary access pass for each device. Okay, so driving usage. So this hopefully is quite familiar to a lot of you. This is a standard sort of rollout plan of a testing phase, planning a rollout strategy, and then driving it through to deployment, reporting, monitoring, and remediation. Just to walk through that, we're looking at creating test users and early adopters. These users should be across the personas that we discussed earlier. So what what we often find is that when a deployment's taking place, the IT department's where we start and gets addressed, and often it doesn't get beyond the IT department. Issues are found because of the range of applications maybe that an IT department will use, and it slows down the whole process. There's no reason why we need to wait for that particular group before we start releasing these techniques to the wider user population. So we're going to all of the Entra options that we see. So when we were talking about the temporary access pass, we saw there were groups that we could deploy to. We'll be talking about conditional access. Within that, you can target at groups as well, or specific users. So we'd recommend using groups to target those pilot users and early adopters. Conditional access policies should be used to enforce phishing resistant passless with credentials, and you can do that by operating system type. So you may not want to target iOS, for instance, and Android, and then move on to Windows and Mac. We'll come on to a slide later where we'll see how Microsoft gives one suggestion of doing this. Talking about the actual deployment and not targeting IT straight away, Microsoft do have a recommendation of starting with information workers, if we're taking their personas from earlier, information workers, then frontline workers, then IT pros, and then highly regulated workers. And that's just their suggestion, but you should find out what works best for yourselves, really. So key to the rollout is informing the users and end user communication. Suggestion is that we start 60 days out from enforcement. So this is just a message about the value of phishing resistant authentication methods and to encourage users to proactively enroll. One thing I didn't actually mention earlier was if we look at those policies, you may well find that passkey in FIDO2 is not enabled by default. There's no reason not to enable it. So by all means, go ahead, enable it. People can enroll themselves. We shouldn't be stopping people from adopting stronger security techniques if they want to. That should be fine. So 60 days out, start the communication. 45 days out, repeat the message. 30 days out, we need to start the message that the clock's ticking down. Again, encourage users to proactively enroll. 15 days out, repeat the message, tell them how to contact the help desk, and then again 7 days out, and then a day out. So it's that communication that we often don't see, not in that sort of depth. There may be 1 or 2 messages will go out, and it's really not enough. People will miss the messages, or they just won't read them properly. So get that messaging out. Reporting and monitoring. So Microsoft have a lot of reporting abilities. Workbooks is quite a good one, but you do need, so that's up in identity protection. There are workbooks in there that will show you the authentication. You do need to a workspace and to set that up. It's not difficult. I haven't got it set up in this lab, so we won't have a look at that. But within the authentication methods, we have got this activity monitoring, which is very useful. We can see who's registered. So during that stage where we're encouraging people to register. Keep an eye on this, see what's going on here. We can drill down into these. So for instance, let's take one I know. Passwordless phone in. So we've got Matt and Sam are in there. They've done that, and I know I'm the only one that's done passkey. So you can drill in and find the actual users and what they've registered for, which is quite useful. So that's in the authentication methods activity area. Once we get to well, during that deployment and the enforcement, of course, the one of the best places to get the feedback from is the help desk. So have a look at the ticket volume, monitor the help desk for more information. And then we need to move on eventually to enforcement. So enforcement, as we spoke a bit about earlier, is conditional access. Is a primary mechanism here. Conditional access is going to require entry P1 licensing, and the examples that Microsoft give us here are again based on a persona-based approach to conditional access rules. Of course, this may not suit everyone based on your organisation and your earlier planning. So if we just have a quick look at a conditional access rule and see what options we've got there. So we can specify the users and groups. Hopefully we're going to migrate this eventually to all users. That's of course our plan, but for testing we can specify particular users, and we can put exclusions in as well for possibly some of those legacy applications that you can't use MFA for. Targeting of resources should probably be all resources, but again, you may have some resources that aren't capable. And down to the grant access, which is the real key to this. And the grant access needs to require authentication strength. Now, we spoke earlier about passwordless and the phishing-resistant MFA and their ability, but you can see here I've got a different authentication strength. We can customize those strengths that you see within conditional access and that users are able to use. So, as you can see here, Microsoft have provided these built-in strengths, but we can create our own, as I've done here with a custom strength. And you can see I've allowed temporary access pass as well in this, just as an example in my lab. To do that, you just select a new authentication strength, and you can select any of these types of authentication that you see fit. Okay. So hopefully we've completed that. We've completed the enforcement. Organisation is phishing resistant. We've tied it down so that they can't use any of the less secure methods, but risks still exist. The keys in the name really, it's phishing resistant, not phishing proof. So there are still going to be ways to get around these methods. However, we can detect some of these issues. So some of the examples are listed here: activity from anonymous IP addresses, malicious IP addresses and so on. All of these can be logged and managed through Microsoft Defender and other logs. But we ourselves can take actions to reduce that risk. One that we can do is have a look at Microsoft Entra ID protection, which is potentially a whole webinar in its own right. But have a look at the Microsoft Entra ID protection deployment guide. That's very comprehensive, as all their guides are. You can configure your risk logs to export them to a SIEM, Sentinel, for example, or Secure 365, or whatever your preference is. Medium user risk is an interesting one. We often see that our customers will alert on high risk users. Those medium risk users, or that have been put as a medium risk, they may indicate the start of a more comprehensive attack against that particular user. So it's worth noting those and investigating from the start to preempt a more coherent attack on them. Conditional access policy to block high-risk users. Of course, that is dependent on licensing. So in summary, phishing-resistant and passwordless authentication is the next step in the security journey for organisations. I think I've missed a word out there, which is probably essential. It's the next essential step, or an essential next step even. So I really think this is something that we need to look more and more at. Microsoft has deprecated other methods in the past, such as the SMS, phone sign-in. So it's worth moving forwards towards their more secure methods. You will see in their secure score, it's I always see a phishing-resistant deployment recommendation, usually against admins, but recommendation for sure is to move the whole company towards that method. As you've seen, it's not difficult, it's not expensive to deploy. Of course, if you want to go to P2 and enter a suite with verified ID, then that will add to the expense. And implementing phishing-resistant MFA is critical for protecting your organisation from increasingly sophisticated cyber threats. With that, I'll hand back over to Adrian for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was very informative for me. I've learned quite a bit, actually. One of the questions I had, and I'm going to put you slightly on the spot here, about FIDO2 keys, etc.
Yeah.
You mentioned to me that in iOS, we can actually store one of the keys in the iOS wallet. Which method where I can store the data?
With the wallet or in the Authenticator app? In the
actual wallet.
In the actual wallet, yeah, I have configured that in the past where it's actually stored in the wallet. That's it goes through a request on the phone to store it and to retrieve it.
Okay, perfect.
These days, I'd recommend using Authenticator really.
Okay. That makes sense. Another question. So what we're talking about earlier, as you mentioned a few other bits and pieces about people just clicking yes. That's classed as what we see the increase of what they call MFA fatigue. Where we've seen the users now actually asking for a number to be tested in, does that help mitigate some of that MFA fatigue where they have to actually type in a number instead of just clicking yes, no. That's because I'm just questioning that. Is that now being enforced by Microsoft to put in a number in the Authenticator?
I believe it is, but there is an option I can show you actually within Authenticator where we can enforce that ourselves anyway.
Oh, excellent.
Let me just find it.
Well, Andrew, just do that. Any other questions, feel free to ask it in the Q&A session.
So if we
excellent.
look at the Authenticator, so you remember within the policies, this is where we enabled and changed a few things. Well, we can configure options here as well. So within Authenticator, we've got an Authenticator mode, and we can say passwordless or push. So we can stop that push method, which is where the fatigue came from.
Yep.
That MFA fatigue came from. But to answer your question about putting a code in, well, yeah, that is more secure, but there have been attacks that I've heard of before where someone will phone up. Adrian, this is Andrew from the IT department. We're just testing a new MFA method. You should have a number on your phone. Could you tell me what it is, please? You know, that sort of thing. So, you know, there's always that human factor.
Yes.
And that's what we need to get away from.
No, absolutely. No, that makes sense. And I guess just looking at everything that we've discussed, this will be for all the users. There's no difference between your admin or just your power users. We should really embrace that for all of our staff in the organization to move forward. Initially, absolutely, like you said, even if you just want to test it, it sounds like that your admin or your admin accounts is absolutely critical. And then very quickly after that, move that into your user base to get them embracing the technology.
I mean, if that's a traditional way we've done it, is look at the critical users, the IT, and for sure you should do. But that shouldn't stop you, as I said earlier, just because, you know, you may be having a problem with getting that out to the IT base, depending on how many IT engineers you have. That shouldn't stop you moving forward with other personas. I mean, a lot of our attacks we see, they're against the chief execs, right, and the accounts department. So I wouldn't say no, do IT first. I'd say, you know, move as fast as you can, but in a structured way. If IT's holding you up, just move along with the rest of the user base.
That's perfect. And I think final question for the day, hopefully, for guest accounts, can this be put in place for guest users as well? That's accessing the organization where we shared data with guests.
Yeah, in fact, I am logged on the account you saw me logged on with. So if we just bring it back. So this is Softworks Lab tenant, but I'm logged on with my softworks.com account as a guest in that tenant. And I used phishing-resistant authentication to get on there. Now, the only caveat there is that I had to be registered myself with phishing-resistant. So tenant to tenant, it passed through the fact that I had logged on to softworks.com as a phishing-resistant with a phishing-resistant method.
So where you have guests who doesn't have it, that it might add a level of complexity potentially, but it really depends on how secure the organization want to be and what type of security they want to embrace. No, that makes sense. But that's quite a small little gotcha that people got to know about. No, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Andrew, again, thank you very much. Very informative. Really enjoyed the session. Learned something new, which is always a positive. If anybody's got questions or anything else, do let us know. And as I said, feel free. We will be providing the slides afterwards. If you have any other questions or anything else you want to have it. I do have one final question that's just sneaked in right at the end. So I'm just going to quickly read it, publish it and read it to you, Andrew. What would be the best method for protecting shared accounts What do you do regarding shared mailboxes or accounts accessed by multiple users?
Oh, that's a good question. A shared security key is a possibility there. So if it's on site, or I'd have to come back to you on that one. That's a difficult one, but certainly a shared security key would be a possibility there.
But with shared mailboxes, the users could still authenticate, and you give them permission to that shared mailbox, so that shouldn't really make a difference.
Well, I mean, yeah, unless you've, I mean, the only reason really for logging on to a shared mailbox is with, I think it's capacity and some other functionality that Microsoft require you to actually have a license and a password for. So, I mean, really, you know, if you're looking at security frameworks, you shouldn't have any shared accounts at all, really.
Yeah,
and if you, so yeah, it's a difficult one.
So it's basically accounts. It's more of a question: why would you have it? What's the business reason for having users? Because actually, one user, one password is a view. But I know it's anonymous. But whoever that was, feel free to reach out. Would love to understand more the scenario, what you have in mind, and we can discuss the best method. But normally the idea is single user, single login, single authentication from a point of view. But that's quite a interesting question, so feel free to either connect to me or Andrew on LinkedIn or mail us directly. We'll be happy to pick up that conversation and have a more of a better understanding what you're trying to achieve and what's the best way to secure the scenario. Thank you very much, really appreciate that. And just a reminder, our next CISO webinar will be on the 28th of May. Feel free to register. We will be sending out the confirmation of the topic shortly. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice day.